And welcome back to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. It is that time again, as we do every week. Dan Labbe with Tim Bielik and Lance Reisland. We are going to do our Browns only mock draft, the first 4 rounds, starting at pick number 74 this week. We are using ESPN's mock draft simulator. I think this is new. It's from the ESPN Sports Analytics site, espnsportsanalytics.com. So trying a new one out here, and the Browns are on the clock at 74. So let's see. Tyler Scott is a guy that we might have had some interest in at number 69. DeJuan Jones, tackle, goes 73. Let's see who's available here, Tim, for the Browns, and you can go ahead and make a case for us. So as you look at this list that I call up on our screen share, give me some names that you like. There's Marvin Mims. Maybe that's the direction we need to go here. I can look for guys, I can look for positions, whatever you want me to do.
Well, for me, I think Mims would be the guy, but I think one guy that is there that we really haven't talked about at all, and we did defensive lineman last week, Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. I mean, this is a guy who's got some good size, 6'5", 264 pounds, very productive. Tested, I think, very well at the combine. Is another one of those guys I think has got some good athletic tools, needs to kind of, work on that technique a little bit. But again, something you can learn. You can't teach, the size and athleticism he plays with. He'd be, if he sneaks down, late second round, I get interested, possible trade up. But I just talked glowingly about Marvin Mims. I've been doing that for the last couple of weeks. I think you have an idea where my draft crush next week might be going. But so, I mean, this for me would be an easy call with Marvin Mims, although Foskey really has me thinking here.
Lance, what do you think? I mean, this is the wide receiver pod. Maybe we have to take a wide receiver, but is there somebody here that you could get talked into who's not Marvin Mims?
Well, yeah, I agree with the Foskey kid. We haven't talked about him at all. I think Derek Hall had a good film. I enjoyed watching his film. Last week we took you guys. We took my tight end over Jair Brown. I really like Brown. You guys gave me the Coons kid, so I appreciate you giving me the Coons go. But yeah, I think Marvin Mims is for sure the guy if available here. He's really good on film. Is there a chance he still won't be around even though they're saying this? Because I tell you what, his film, like you were saying earlier, Tim, about these guys are so similar, some of these guys. He's really good. Marvin Mims is really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think with this receiver class, it's really going to be the beauty's in the eye of the beholder with this class. I mean, the range on this, I think after the top 4, it could go anywhere. I mean, Marvin Mims could go early in the second round. I think he's that good. I think he's, teams might be scared of the size. We know teams that, are willing to spread it out more, like the Browns obviously seem like they want to do. They might value a guy like Mims more, because he just has such explosiveness and such field stretching ability that you have a quarterback with a strong arm like Deshaun Watson does. You want a guy who has that ability, to be on the receiving end of some of those passes. So, I mean, like I said, it could go, 20 different directions. I'm pretty sure you could do a random draft simulator like we're doing right now, and you're probably just as likely to get the order because it's just so all over the place, I think.
So it feels to me like we looked at a couple defensive ends and kind of discussed them, but we sort of asked the question, why wouldn't we take Marvin Mims here? And it's basically those 2 edge rushers. But it seems like Marvin Mims is the guy that everyone seems to love. So I think we got to go with the gut instinct here and just take Marvin Mims. I think that's a win here with the first pick for the Browns in the draft. So he's going to be the guy at number 74. So we're up to number 98. Tim, go ahead and walk us through some names here. Zach Harrison is a name that has come up on this pod a couple times if we're looking at edge rushers, but talk us through some names here that you see on the picks remaining.
Yeah, Zach Harrison, I think we talked about, is a guy who I think is like a pure power edge rusher who is not as bendy as I think you would like necessarily for, if the Browns indeed go wide 9. But I think what he is he can be a top level edge setter kind of. Maybe, I don't know if he could be as good at that as Jadeveon Clowney was, but if he could be in that area of, a guy who can hold down the edge, I think that's a good way to go. Jordan Battle, the safety from Alabama there, ranked number 96. He's another guy that is very interesting. I think he's a balanced safety. He can cover. He can play down the box. I mean, you're looking for a third safety behind Juan Thornhill and Grant Delpit. I think, as much as, I think Grant Delpit's strong with free skills, and I think, Thornhill is a free that has some strong ability. I think, Jordan Battle could be either one, I think, in the NFL. So, I mean, as much as, I think Harrison is, yeah, that's a tough call for me between, going for, a run stopping type of defensive end, which of course the Browns lost. I mean, Obo Okoronkwo is, just only about 250 pounds. So you lose some size on the edge. You may not get elite sack production, I think, with Zach Harrison. Maybe if he gets bigger, you can kick him inside for pass rush situations. Right now, he would be my call, but it is hard to kind of look at that, look at Kendre Miller, look at Jordan Battle. That's a tough call. I mean, that's why I'm glad I'm not a general manager. I just get to sit here, and tweet about it and, talk about it with you guys.
So, Lance, is there somebody you want to make the case for here? And we got to play this game a little bit, too, because obviously we're going to be back on the clock pretty early on Friday at number 111. So you're picking 98, and then there's, do the math here in my head, 13 picks later, you're going to be on the clock. So maybe somebody else you like is still going to be there.
So I did a tight end breakdown today, and obviously I like a lot of the tight ends. You guys know I like Kuntz. The guy who doesn't fit the guardrails that you guys have now enlightened me on, Schoonover from Michigan is going to be 25 years old, but he's really good, and he kind of fits the Andrew Barry. I mean the Stefanski. He can play in or out. I like Henry Tutu, the linebacker from Alabama. I always like linebackers from Alabama. They understand how to play coverage. They understand how he's a pretty athletic guy. I like him. I like Harrison too. The Rice kid, and we can't go receiver. I like the Rice kid too. He's a very good receiver. I liked him on film. Those guys are fresh. Zach Harrison, I'm not sure how he fits in the Schwartz. And I always say, people always ask me, what's the key to a defensive lineman for Schwartz? He's got to be able to bend. And it sounds kind of weird, but you got to be able to bend and play a wide 5 and a wide 3 and a wide 9. Harrison does not bend very well right now if you watch him on film, but man, he's a mauler. And then I like Kendre Miller. If you had to ask me if he was around at this pick, I would go Miller, because he's a guy Tim talked about 2 weeks ago who I had not watched, and now I've watched him a bunch, and he's good.
Okay, so Tim, let's say that Lance just talked us out of Zach Harrison, and he just doesn't quite fit what we're looking for at that other end. Are you still leaning safety? Can you be talked into Kendre Miller? Where do you think we should go here?
I could be talked into Kendre Miller. One thing I wish I could have access to, I'm sure it exists somewhere, but I don't know where it is explosive run rates. And I think that's an analytic buzz term, with draft picks with running backs is, can they get those, like the more explosive runs guys have, the better they are, because if you've shown a propensity to break big runs, you're going to, at one level, you should be able to do it at another level. And I think, with Kendre Miller, the build is similar as far as, size goes to Nick Chubb. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Nick Chubb. That's a high bar to point to, because Nick Chubb is one of the best running backs in the NFL, and he's consistently been one of the best running backs in the NFL. But I think this is a guy who's got a lot of great production, almost 1,400 yards as a receiver, 14 yards as 100 yards as a rusher. I mean, just kind of still needs to be better, finding holes a little bit, coming off an injury he had in the Fiesta Bowl win against Michigan. But I think if you're looking for a guy who you can bridge a little bit, I mean, with running backs, Miller being an interesting guy, I kind of be more in the camp of the smaller running back, but I could be talked into Kendre Miller as long as but I think the question is, you still need to find a receiving back option. So as much as I like Kendre Miller, I know I'm kind of like going back a little bit. I keep going to Jordan Battle, because the idea of, having that third safety, a guy who could potentially cover in the slot, again, having depth and having insurance in multiple spots, versatility for Jim Schwartz's defense. I really like Jordan Battle in this situation, and it pains me as a guy who loves offensive skill positions.
Jordan Battle feels like this feels like a pick we could actually see if he's here at 98. I do wonder if the Browns would take a running back on Friday night, even if it's somebody they like. Andrew Barry has tended to take these guys on day 3. Even going back to the Sashi Brown days when Barry was working in the front office, they took Matthew Day really late. I think he tends to like guys on day 3, especially because they already have that workhorse in Nick Chubb. So I think it wouldn't surprise me if they took a safety on day 2. So I think that's the direction we're going to go. We went with Lance. We rode with Lance last week. We're going to overrule Lance here and take Jordan Battle at pick
I like
number
Jordan Battle. I think he's really, Jordan Battle's a really good player.
All right, so we have gotten some rest. We are back on the clock at number 111. There are still some players on the board. Kendre Miller is one of them that we left there the other night. Some more running backs here as well. So, Tim, who are some names that stand out to you as I kind of scroll through here at pick number 111?
I think Kendre Miller looks even better at 111 here. Again, I still have questions what kind of receiver he can be, but it's just when you're looking from a pure runner perspective, there's just so much to love about his game. I'm not sure what other running backs would be available there. I don't see Tyjae Spears, so I would assume he was gone by this point.
Looking through here just real quick on the running backs. Yeah, I don't see him remaining. So yeah, I think he's off the board. I mean, Lance, here we go. We can get that running back if we want. But are there any other names here that you're kind of like, oh, that guy's intriguing?
Well, yeah, you go back to the depth at edge. Yeah, I had Diaby out of Louisville. He's a really good edge player. He's got a ton of talent. It just tells you the depth because his talent, his numbers are really good. I was thinking about Tim when he talked about those explosive runs, and I think what the Browns do so well is that these backs know where the holes are going to be. And I've been to a lot of practices in my life, and the Browns, based on what they're seeing, a 3 technique, a 5 technique, a nose, if they see an odd front, a tight front, whatever they see. They kind of dictate where they're so good up front and they're so well coached. That's why I think these backs. That's why I think obviously Nick Chubb, but that's why I think these backs have such success regardless of who's in for the Browns. Is when you watch them practice, they're running outside zone against an odd front. They expect to hit it here. Now in the NFL, everything changes obviously, but I just think with Kendre Miller, he comes from a very good offensive scheme at TCU. I think he's a great fit. I think he's explosive. The backs and the O-line with the Browns are my absolute favorite. Again, you remember every single day we got there, we did the thing, and I went down to the O-line and I went down to the running backs every day because that is why they're so good, because they know where they're going, both the backs and the O-line. So I think he's a great call. I think he would fit in great.
Yeah, just to lay it out for everyone, when you're in Berea, there's like 3 main practice fields, and sometimes 4 depending how they paint them. But the team, and they'll do 7-on-7 and stuff on one field. It's usually one of the 2 main fields near the building, and then off on one of the far fields, they do the offensive line. Sometimes the running backs are over there, and every time, if you were looking for Lance, he was way off on one of those far fields, standing by himself, just watching Bill Callahan work with that offensive line. So. Definitely something that you got a good taste of. I think Kendre Miller's kind of our consensus here. So I don't think we need to argue on this. I think we can turn in the card. We're going to go Kendre Miller at 111, and then that brings us to pick number 126. Still some names we've been dancing around a little bit. Tim, who do you like here?
We talked about Nick Herbig from Wisconsin before. I think as an edge rusher, I think he's got some untapped potential. I think he's got a chance to be successful either as a linebacker or as an edge rusher. I think, even though he's smaller, he could fit the short scheme because he has bend, because he can be able to get around the edge, and he's got natural pass rush tools. He could work well as a linebacker in some schemes, especially schemes like the blitz. I don't believe Jim Schwartz is much of a blitzer that he usually likes to get pressure before. Maybe sometimes he'll send a 5th, crowded boxes, maybe stuff like that. Herbig here feels like it has the potential to be a steal because, again, we talked about this way back when you started doing these draft podcasts. He's a projection in some ways because his position in the NFL uncertain, and NFL teams love certainty. They love to have an idea of where a guy's going to go, how he fits you, as opposed to taking a player and taking his talents and molding a role for him, kind of. Like, we saw Andrew Berry do 2 years ago with Jeremiah Usu-Koromoa. That's why I feel like, again, if it seems like what Browns, to me, seem like one of the more likely teams to take Nick Herbig and then put him at defensive end.
Lance, what do you think?
I love I absolutely, this is another one Tim got me going on. He is, so I always look at, the people talk about his size, but it would be different if he was in a heavy 5 technique or a heavy 9 technique. So, he's not going to have his hands directly on that tackle. And I always tell, one of the things we always talk about, are you a light or do you play heavy? Well, early rundowns when I was coaching, we always talk about playing heavy. Make sure you cover, make sure your foot is on the helmet of the guy in front of you, especially the tackle. Schwartz doesn't like to do that. So that idea of, I don't know how he'll hold up in the run. It's not a super power run game that they see in the NFL in terms of gaps and all, everybody. He's a situational guy. He is fantastic. He gets after the quarterback. And when you talk about, everybody always talks about matchups with Schwartz. For me, it's not as much matchups as it is alignments. His alignments give those guys great edges. And when you have edges, you can be undersized because you're not engaging. You're not taking on that tackle who's going to get that, that punch in there quick. You're on the edge and you're forcing him to kick to you. You can argue he's as good off the edge in terms of a flat speed rusher off the edge running that hoop as anybody in college. He's really good. I think he'd be a steal here.
This was easy. This is a front office working in harmony here, as we are going to take Nick Herbig. So our draft, Marvin Mims at 74, Jordan Battle, the safety, at number 98, Kendry Miller, the running back, at 111, and Nick Herbig, the linebacker, at 126. Interesting, ESPN's analytics tells us that Herbig's chance available, I don't know if this is because we picked him or what, but Herbig's chance of being available at our next pick would have been non-existent. And also with Marvin Mims, there was a 6% chance he would have been available at our next pick. So I think we did okay there, taking the right guys at the right places. So again, Mims, the wide receiver, Battle, the safety, Miller, the running back, and Herbig, the linebacker. Tim, if this is the draft, if we're sitting here in the middle of the day on Saturday and these are the first 4 picks, you're pretty happy with this, right?
Yeah, I think Browns fans, this might be as good as you get, not having a pick in the first 2 rounds of the draft. And one point on Miller that I forgot to mention is, the fact that he's similar to Nick Chubb in certain ways is, in terms of build, is you take Nick Chubb off the field and, Nick Chubb's hard enough to tackle on his own because he's got power and speed. You put Kendry Miller out there, he's another bigger back. I mean, I would imagine that's the last thing another linebacker wants to see is, another bigger running back that the Browns have. You take Nick Chubb out, you could put Jerome Ford in for speed, Kendry Miller in for more power situations, who, even though he has some speed to work with. So I think that creates a lot of versatility there in that running back room. Like I said, questions about, can he be a pass catcher out of the backfield? But I think those are things you can work around, especially if, like I said, when you draft Marvin Mims, all of a sudden you have a rotation potentially of up to 6 or 7 receivers that you could work with. I mean, we talked about the top 3, Murray Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Elijah Moore, but then behind them you have Marquise Goodwin, David Bell, and in this scenario, Marvin Mims. That's a pretty good 1 through 6, where you could essentially run a line change if you want to, like in hockey, just to get those 3 guys a rest in any situation. You have guys for, like I said, multiple situations, whatever it calls for. So from a skill position perspective, I think this gives Deshaun Watson a lot more options to play with.
Yeah, Lance, this feels like we've addressed needs, also gotten, in a lot of cases, if not the best player available, a player that, the right player at the right spot.
Well, you can see why Tim is the draft expert and not I, because I was going to take Miller at 98 and he was still available at 111. So we're gonna swing towards Tim when we have those battles between us, because we got him where we wanted him at 111. Herbig at 126 is amazing to me. Because like I said, you watch him on film and with matchups and alignments, if you're in a 3rd and long situation, you're in nickel, whatever it is, and he's out there in that wide 5 on a 3rd and long, and teams obviously are going to put that back towards, you can either put Miles at the 3 or Miles on the other side. He can give you a pass rusher. He's also a guy in the nickel. I think he's talented enough to play that middle backer, and he has those skills. He has ball skills. He can drop. He can do a bunch of different stuff. So I think he's a perfect fit, and I think he's a perfect fit for the scheme. Not only is he good for any scheme, but I think he's really a perfect fit for Schwartz. So I think that's a really, really, really good 4 picks right there.
All right, there we go. Our NFL Draft podcast here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. As I mentioned earlier, just make sure you become a Football Insider subscriber to get text updates, get the newsletter every day delivered to your inbox, and also get access to those stories that are behind that paywall at cleveland.com/Browns. Just go to cleveland.com/Browns and click the blue banner at the top of the page to get info and get signed up on that. We'll have lots of stuff coming your way, especially as draft week starts to heat up next week. And make sure you're subscribed to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, on Apple Podcasts, we love to see those 5-star reviews. And also when you say nice things about us. All right, I think we got one more of these left next week coming up. But today's was fun. For Tim and Lance, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.